Hello, my dears. My name is Mariana, and I am a professional tarot reader, writer, and scholar, and the creator of Persephone's Sister, which is a platform to discuss mysticism, magic, and meaning in an informed and thoughtful way. Today's topic is Archetypal Tarot, which is something that seems to be kind of a hot topic nowadays, but in my opinion, seems to be something that people don't understand at all. So let's get into it. So when we talk about archetypes in a modern context, we're talking about patterns that we see usually in film and books and things like that, or we're talking about tropes that are really common. When we're talking about archetypes in terms of tarot, in terms of mysticism, that ain't it. We're talking about something deep, something really psychologically profound. So here's the history of archetypes. One of the founding fathers of psychology at the turn of the 20th century was Carl Jung, who is my hero. Carl Jung discovered something called the collective unconscious. Of course, he didn't discover it because it always existed and it's an eternal thing, but he discovered it. The collective unconscious is a space of unconsciousness that exists not just in our personal psyches, but in the world. So let's break this down. Unconsciousness is basically all the stuff that happens in our psyches that's not in our ego consciousness. It's not what we think, what we believe, or even that stuff that's like, oh, I know I'm kind of messed up in that way, but I'm gonna pretend it's not there. That's still conscious. When we're talking about unconsciousness, we're talking about that stuff that you do approximately 45 years of therapy and then go, oh, damn. That's what happens in your unconscious. We must distinguish, of course, between the personal unconscious and the collective unconscious. In the personal unconscious, we're talking about what your particular unconsciousness looks like. So basically, all of your shit. When we're talking about the collective unconscious, we're talking about everybody's shit. So inside the collective unconscious, Jung identified what he called primordial images that exist beyond space and time and culture. They're just innate inside of us. And this was where Jung got really interested, and this is where it gets a little weird. Bear with me. When we're experiencing archetypes, we experience them as projections. And what that means is that we're seeing the archetype of the mother, for example, on other people. So this is why I watch so much ASMR, because I'm longing for that archetypal mother in my life. We project it, and that's how we experience archetypes. As Jung once said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Basically, that means whatever's going on unconsciously, you'll project outside of yourself and it'll just happen around you. When we're working with the tarot, it's a really profound tool to get to know these archetypes deeply and to allow them to help us manage our lives and also become whole, enlightened beings. That's the real goal, I guess, right? So now we're gonna zoom out a little bit and go back to tarot. And I'm gonna say something that might be controversial, but I've said it before and it's true. The tarot doesn't quite work for the 21st century. Almost said 20th century because I'm an old soul. We don't know much about the history of the tarot because scholarship just doesn't care. I'm a little guilty of that. I didn't study the tarot when I got my degree. But what we do know is that the tarot was created in the 15th century, either to be a playing card game for the incredibly rich, looking at you, Medicis, or to be coded messages by Christian mystics. That's the one we're all hoping for. But the images and the archetypes of the tarot come from a very Christian background. And they also come from the mindset of the dudes who lived in 1435. So for us in 2020, we have to do a little bit of work maybe to understand these archetypes. A little renaming, a little reframing, recontextualizing, just to understand what is the core of this archetype. This is why I really like the decks that are coming out today, because people are less and less afraid to just take an archetype and change it. But the work of Archetypal Tarot is to discover the archetypes internally, to understand our relationship with the archetypes so that we can read in a way that actually moves us closer to the goal of individuation, which, if you don't know what individuation is, Google's cool. I'm going to give you an example of how to work with these archetypes internally, how to get in relationship with them. And I'm going to tell you a story. So many years ago, I was considering going to grad school, and I had a dream that I was going to go visit the library. So I go to the library and I open the door, and when I go inside, I realize it's my grandfather's house. Now this is significant because my grandfather was a cool dude, and I definitely tended to idolize him just a teeny little bit. So I went up the stairs towards where my grandfather kept his library of 10,000 plus books. True story. You can check out @grandpa'sbooks on Instagram to see some of them. And there, at the top of the stairs, was Carl Jung on a throne with 2 sycophants at each knee. And I was like, the thing was, in the dream, I was astounded. There was this energy of incredible enthusiasm, but also I felt so small in his presence. I felt like he has all the answers and I'm just a mere mortal. And just by being in his presence, I have the opportunity to imbibe all of his wisdom. Now, this was before I ever had any real grasp on the tarot. I hadn't really engaged with the imagery in any deep way. When I started to play with it and I saw the Hierophant for the first time, I was like, damn, I dreamed that. And the cool thing was that it immediately clicked with me that while I had struggled with the Hierophant in my reading, it occurred to me that I already had a relationship with him in my unconscious. My dream had given me the Hierophant in all of his Jungian glory. My job was just to figure out the depth of my relationship to this archetype and what it was trying to teach me. So I went back and I looked through my life and I found that I had projected this archetype of the Hierophant onto so many, many old men. It sounds a little creepy, I'm not gonna lie, and looking back on it, it's a little embarrassing. This archetype of the Hierophant, which to me I had just always called the old wise man, had been something that was really guiding me towards a place in my life where I got to step into that power in my own and at the same time deconstruct the dynamic of smallness that I felt in the presence of this archetype. So when I really started working with the Hierophant, that experience was so much deeper and so much more profound because I wasn't just working with an archetype, a symbol of something. I was working with an archetype that lived inside of me for all of my life, that had a really clear message and that was really driving me to something, to a point in my life, towards the self. So if you are interested in working with the tarot in an archetypal way, the first step is to just kind of get into your own psyche, in your dreams, in your weird fascinations with certain types of people, in your weird aversions to certain types of people. These are places where there's probably some projection going on and something there to dig into. But start taking note. Keep a dream journal. Keep a regular journal. Journal it out. And start to find where these archetypes are and start to identify how they've existed inside you and what their meaning is. Then return to the tarot and see if any of the cards in the tarot connect to these archetypes that you're discovering within yourself. Once you're there, the work is just to kind of play with it. Just ask yourself, when I see this card, what is the impulse? What is the instinct? What's the emotion? Because when we think about tarot, we get very cranial about it. We tend to be very must know keywords. But the truth is, when you're working with the tarot in an intuitive way, which most people tend to lean towards nowadays, or in an archetypal way, which is very similar to working with it in an intuitive way, it has to reside in the heart center, in the unconscious place. You're diving into the deep waters of the soul here when you're working with it, so your brain doesn't have too much to do with it. You kind of have to let that part go. So when you start really investigating the archetypes of the tarot, it's all about how they make you feel and what gut reactions you have, and just be aware of how the archetypes are resonating inside of you. That's not just what does it mean, because it doesn't matter what it means when you're working with the tarot archetypally. It matters what's happening inside me when this appears in my view. So this is just a little introduction into the world of archetypal tarot. Obviously, if you want to get real into it, there's so much material out there that you can study with each card to really delve into the history of those archetypes and see how they connect to your experience. Now, working with the tarot in this way can be time consuming. It can be really difficult emotionally sometimes, so you have to be patient and you have to just be willing to explore yourself. I can't tell you how many times people tell me that, beginners especially, tell me that they're reading for themselves and at some point they're just like, I don't want to go there. And that's not gonna get you anywhere when you're working with the tarot archetypally. You have to go in with, like, you know, your ovaries zipped up tight in there and be fierce about it, because when you're trying to confront your unconscious stuff, it's gonna eat you alive if you're not willing to get your sword out. So this is just a little introduction into how to work with the tarot archetypally. There's a lot of ways to approach this. I see a lot of young readers who are like, I'm reading for myself and then I just see a card and I'm like, I don't know what it means, and so I just keep pulling more cards. And when we do that, we're just confusing ourselves. The work is to get the card and to dig and dig and dig until you find something that's meaningful to you. Because here's another thing that is going to be controversial. It doesn't matter what cards you pull. Feels really good to say that. The point is, you pull it and you find something in yourself that's true. You find something in yourself that's longing to emerge, to continue on your path of becoming. So I hope this was informative. I hope that you can now approach the tarot in an archetypal way with a strong base of information and clarity about what you're doing so that you can really get the most out of it. And if you enjoyed this, please like, please subscribe. This is a new adventure for me, so I am extremely grateful that you're here, and also would love to know what else you would love to talk about. The reason that I'm doing this is just because I am a huge lover of this new spiritual movement, and also it makes me a little tremendously sad when I see so many people who do not really go through the effort of educating themselves and getting a real informed grounding in the stuff that they're working with. So I'd love to dive into a whole bunch of stuff. So leave me a comment, let me know what would be interesting to you, and have a beautiful, meaningful day. Thanks.